something that I want to talk about now. The Umayyads did not focus on da'wah. The Umayyads did not focus on da'wah. There was not a strong incentive or movement in the Umayyad dynasty to try to call people to Islam. And one of the reasons for that is because when you become a Muslim, what happens? No, when you become a Muslim, yes, you no longer pay the jizya. And so, the Umayyad policy was, let the people remain upon their religion because it fills the state coffers. And that is the same mistake that the Ottomans are going to make too. Perhaps the same mistake that the Mughals made as well. But I don't know a lot about Mughal history, so I'm not going to comment until I've done more reading. But definitely, the Umayyads, that's what they did. That was a policy. We will not actively seek to convert these people. Now, we're not talking about forced conversion. We're talking about sending ulama and students of knowledge into the various cities, inviting the people to Islam, talking about the beauty of Islam, asking the people if they would be ready to accept Islam, like we are doing now. We're going to Papua New Guinea, we're going to all these little areas around the world, and we're trying to give da'wah. Right? People are doing, what do they call those da'wah, those street da'wah, sort of just walking up to people, excuse me, can I speak to you for a second, and 5-minute, conversations. You need to watch this. Go online later. It's called Da'wah Made Easy. Right? Da'wah Made Easy. It is a British dentist, and he has this weekly street da'wah thing that he does. Lots of great videos where he's giving da'wah to people, atheists, Christians, etc. And he has these conversations with them, and it's brilliant, mashallah. So many conversions just on the street there. People saying, La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. It's beautiful. Obviously, the videos you're going to see are only the videos where people accept Islam. Right? I don't think we're going to see the videos where, people say, well, thank you, but not for me. But all the success stories are there. This did not happen very much in the time of the Umayyads. And it was an obvious reason. And also, there was not a strong da'wah movement, was because once people become Muslims, then that status of being a non-Muslim changes, right? So technically, Islamically, you should now be allowed the freedom to rise through the ranks. You understand? But one of the problems of the Umayyad dynasty was this focus on Arabness. Like the Turks. Right? Although, to be honest with you, the Turks were not so obsessed with their ethnicity as the Umayyads were. In fact, if you were Albanian or Greek, or you were from the Caucasus region, or you were Circassian or something, you could rise to the level of the Grand Vizier. Right? As-Sadr al-Awwal. You could reach the highest level in the land. And the Turks would also marry their daughters to you even though you were not a Turk. Do you understand? Whereas the Umayyads, no, the nasab was super important. Lineage was very important. So there was no, intermarrying in that sense. So these are all reasons, but we'll come back to that a little bit later. So this is Al-Andalus, most of the Iberian Peninsula, but these areas here in the north were never in Muslim control. All right? So you should understand that these northern areas, the Christians always had a foothold in northern Spain, and from there they were able to slowly over the centuries move south and take over one or more of the Muslim states until finally in 1492 Ferdinand and Isabella. You see how this history sort of links in? Ferdinand and Isabella, they are the ones responsible for the fall of Granada or Granada. So that's the end of Muslim rule there, and they are the same people that are responsible for sending, what's his name? What's that, the criminal? Christopher Columbus. Wallahi, he was a mujrim. There's a book you must read. It's called Lies My Teacher Told Me. Lies My Teacher Told Me. It's written by an American historian, and it tells the story of all these myths and legends and stories the Americans have been telling themselves for hundreds of years now. Christopher Columbus was a genocidal maniac. He was responsible for the brutal suppression of the people on whose islands he landed. The murder, the rape, and the pillage of the native people of those islands. And today he's celebrated as a hero. Right? As a hero. It's unbelievable what you can do when you are writing the history. Subhanallah, it's truly, that's why what I was saying earlier, we were talking about why the Umayyad dynasty seems to be so dark. Why the history seems to be so dark. The reason is that most of the books that were written about the Umayyad history, and the books that wrote about the Umayyad history, they were written in the time of the Abbasids. And because the Abbasids are the ones responsible for the ultimate downfall of the Umayyads, what do they say? History is written by the victors. And that's exactly what happened. So they had every reason to paint the Umayyads in this. Like basically what they are saying is, the Umayyads were terrible. And then we were able to conquer them. And we were able to bring in this wonderful, this new era. So, Allah al-Musta'an. Let's continue. Where were we? Yes. Alright. So, how did we get this far? Ya salam, how we skipped a few, huh? I apologize. Yes. So Walid ibn Abdul Malik, he wanted his son to succeed, but he was overruled. Alright? He wanted his son. So you can already see that this is a problem now. Because by appointing two of your sons as your successors, you are creating the inevitable situation where your sons are going to want to compete with one another. And if one of those sons decides that he's going to ignore his brother in the succession and instead choose his own son, you are setting it up for the same kind of internal conflict that we've already seen. Alright? And that's one of the reasons we'll talk about later. The fact that this became a common thing amongst the Umayyads where they appointed two successors is going to become a real problem. And it's going to become a problem later. He died in Jumad al-Akhir in the year 96. Alright. Now who becomes the Khalifa after him? Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik. He was known for consulting the ulama. Like Raja ibn Haywa was one of his advisors, one of the great scholars of the Tabi'een. And also one of his advisors was Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. We will talk about next. So he used to consult the ulama when making important decisions. Is it halal? Is it allowed in the Sharia? What do you think? Whereas we will see, this is also going to be very common during the Ottoman period as well. I mentioned this a few nights ago when I said that the Ottoman sultans rarely took never took a major decision. Whether the ulama were being coerced, whether the ulama were only telling the sultan what he wanted to hear. But as a policy, you needed to have a fatwa from the Shaykh al-Islam, the mufti of the Ottoman state, before you could go to war, before you could make peace, before you could take any major decision. Alright? So there was this importance given to the Sharia and to the ulama, that is something that the Ottomans need to be commended for. Alright. Now he did not delay his prayers. Can anyone tell me why that's a major issue here? Why would I include that as something to focus on? Isn't that a given? Because the Umayyad sultans were known for delaying the salah. There was this practice where they would delay the salah. So the fact that the historians point out that he didn't delay his prayer, he prayed on time, is because his predecessors were known for delaying the prayer. Okay. Also, it is said that during the Umayyad, I don't know exactly when this happened. Some scholars say it happened during the time of Muawiyah, the first Khalifa of the Umayyad dynasty, that he instituted. Again, put a question mark, but we can say with certainty that this practice started in the time of the Umayyads. When exactly is debatable. And what was that practice? On the day of Eid, what do you have? Salah and then khutbah, right? But during that time, they made the khutbah first and then the salah. Why? Because people would pray and they would leave. And why would they leave? They would leave as a protest. Like if they wanted to demonstrate that they were unhappy with you, their displeasure, they would walk out of the masjid after the salah. So he said, no, we're going to stop that. We're going to have the khutbah first, and then the salah. Alright, so this became a common practice. The Shia, or let me retract that. I retract that. Okay? But one of the lies told about the Umayyad dynasty is that Muawiyah used to have the Jumu'ah prayer on a Thursday. Excuse me, the word Jumu'ah means Friday. So it's a bit confusing. I'm sure that even, simple, uneducated Muslims would have told you that's not kosher. Not halal. Right? So this also happened. He selected Umar ibn Abdul Aziz as his successor. This didn't go down well. Why? Because Umar ibn Abdul Aziz is his cousin. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz is his cousin. He's not his brother. He's not directly in the line of those previous khulafa. And so this was a bit problematic. But he knew and he saw in Umar ibn Abdul Aziz someone that was worthy. So it was enough for him that he was an Umayyad. But for others, no. They were really concerned about that line. Right? It's got to be that line that links up with previous khalifas. So he chose him, and he died during the siege of Constantinople. He said basically, this is what he said. When he sent out the army, he sent the army out towards Constantinople, and then he stayed behind in a city that is in Turkey today. And he said, one of two things are going to happen. We are going to conquer Constantinople, or I will die. And so he died. Right? He died, and then the Muslim army came back to Damascus. Alright? So that was his hope. His hope that he was going to be that Khalifa or that commander that the Prophet ﷺ. Everyone who's doing it, like yes, you have to understand this, and we're going to talk about this on Wednesday as well. That everybody wants the prestige that comes with that. But what kind of prestige is it? Is it a dunyawi prestige, or is it an akhiri prestige? You understand? I'm making up these words now is it the dunyawi or an akhiri, intention? It's both. It's both. Because you want to be that army that the Prophet ﷺ spoke about. You want to be that commander that the Prophet spoke about. But you also want the prestige of being that Muslim ruler that conquered Constantinople, where so many armies and empires had failed to do so. Imagine centuries, just think about this, right? That city by this time is like 300-400 years old, and no one's been able to conquer it, and you are that person? It's like someone who's an athlete and breaks a world record. Why is it such a big deal? Even if you broke it by 10 milliseconds. It's a big deal because maybe it's been there for 20-30 years, and now you come along and you ran that little bit of extra fast. It's a big deal. So anyway, we continue inshallah. So he died in 99, and the Muslims pledged allegiance to Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. Umar ibn Abdul Aziz is a descendant of Umar ibn al-Khattab on his mother's side. Alright? So he's the great-grandson of Umar ibn al-Khattab, but from his mother's side. Now, another thing you need to know about him was that before he became the Khalifa, he was known for a life of luxury. Okay? He was not known necessarily for life. But subhanallah, when he became the Khalifa, he started living the life of a Zahid. He became very, simple in his ways, in his spending, and instead, he used the wealth that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had now placed him in charge of, and he instituted a lot of amazing, reforms in the Umayyad dynasty. Now, one of them was that he replaced oppressive governors around the Muslim world. If they were known, there were many complaints about them because they were oppressive and very hard, what's the word? Iron-fisted. He replaced them. Number two, he cancelled the jizya for new Muslims. Alright, so that's not one reform. He also decreased the spending that was being given to Umayyad families. Right, so this was exorbitant spending on people related to the dynasty. So he reduced that. And as you can imagine, that's not going to be popular. Alright, and one of his major reforms was the institution of justice and the sort of, can we call it a reform? Yeah, the reform around the Muslim world, making sure that the judges were qualified, making sure that the judges ruled according to the Sharia. He also established the concept of the shura again, because You have to understand that what's happening now since the time of the Prophet ﷺ is where leaders are being invested with more and more authority and power. It's no longer like a group decision. Yes, the final decision is with the Khalifa, but in the time of the Prophet and the Khulafa al-Rashideen, it was consultative, right? It was like, what do you think? What do you think? And, oh, that's a very good idea. I think we'll take your idea and we'll implement that. But as time goes on, it's like it's my way or the highway kind of approach. And so what he's doing is he's reinstituting that kind of, system of governance. But this wasn't very popular, right? It wasn't very popular. And he was poisoned by his servant. And he didn't die immediately, as the movies like to tell us. Someone takes a sip of poison and then dies like 10 seconds later. So he was poisoned by his servant. Now, whether or not this was a plot there's a lot of discussion here, but I'm going to summarize it by just saying he was poisoned by his servant, knew that he was poisoned by his servant, but still pardoned him, right, before he died. So that just shows you what kind of person he was. Okay? He died in Rajab in the year 101. So he only ruled for little more than 2 years. But many ulama consider him to be the fifth of the Khulafa al-Rashideen. They consider him to be like Umar the second. That's what many people call him. In fact, one of my friends, he has a book out now. You can check it out online. It's called Lessons of Productivity Lessons from the Life of Umar the Second. My friend's name is Ismail Kamdar. The book's available as an ebook, I think. The book, I'm not sure exactly what the book's name is, but it's Productivity Lessons from the Life of Umar the Second, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. And the author is Ismail Kamdar. Alhamdulillah, the brother has been very active writing books. He's got quite a few books now, alhamdulillah. Right? He's very busy. And he also homeschools his own children himself. Now, that's another amazing accomplishment. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala place barakah in his all of his endeavors, alhamdulillah. Alright, let's move on. The 9th Umayyad Khalifa is Yazid ibn Abdul Malik. He came to power in the year 101 and until the year 105. He was known for his knowledge, because in his early life he used to spend a lot of time in the company of the ulama, in the circles of ulama, and he was praised because of that. So he wasn't someone who was completely... In fact, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, let's just go back a few Khalifas. Abdul Malik ibn Marwan used to be considered like a scholar before he became the Khalifa. Alright? So he was someone who studied with major scholars in Medina, because his father, also I forgot to tell you this, his father Marwan ibn al-Hakam was the governor of Medina. Right? He was the governor of Medina. So Abdul Malik ibn Marwan was able to spend, his early life studying from the ulama of Medina. So, you have to understand also that even though there's a lot of things happening, these people, all of them, as a whole, Islam was at the center of their life. Did they make mistakes? Yes. Did they commit sins? Yes. Were they oppressive at times? Yes. But regardless of all of that, Islam remained at the center of their lives. Alright? So even though, I might not be the best, in terms of leadership, but I was trying to make sure that my children get this good, solid Islamic upbringing. Like Yazid ibn Muawiyah, his early life, he was known for his eloquence. Because his father divorced his mother, and then he went out to live his mother was Bedouin. Right? And the reason why his father divorced his mother was because she kept on complaining about living in the city. She was from a Bedouin tribe, and you know how the Bedouin live. Right? They live in their tents, they move around, they're in the desert, and she wanted to go back there, so she kept on complaining about that. So he said, well, if you want to go, then, I set you free and you can go. So he divorced her, and she took Yazid with her. So he grew up in that Bedouin tribe, learning, pure Arabic. So whatever other issues you might have had against Yazid, no one could ever claim that he was not, articulate and fasih and someone who spoke pure Arabic. So a lot of things that we can also talk about with khair, inshallah. One of the things that Yazid ibn Abdul Malik was known for was that he undid many of the reforms of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz. It's like the PH government trying to undo a lot of the things that were happening in the time of BN, and we might need to connect it, see some parallels there. So there's a lot of reforms, a lot of things that they wanted to change, a lot of things that they wanted to undo. So he undid a lot of those things. Like one of them was that he increased the spending again on the Umayyad family. Obviously, that makes everyone happy. Who doesn't like money? Is there anyone here who doesn't like money? Well, alhamdulillah. Alright, so this was very popular with the Umayyad, with the elites, but not very popular with the masses. Because we're going back to that old regime. One of the reasons why people almost universally loved, Umar ibn Abdul Aziz was because of what he was doing. Money that was usually kept within amongst the elite was now being spread out into, the average person. So many people loved him for that. And now we're going back to the way things were. Obviously, not going to be cool. Just think about this parallel here. What did the previous government... Okay, now I need to be careful. Is it the previous government, or... It's a very confusing time, right? But before what happened a few weeks ago, they were trying to undo a lot of what they viewed as the damage of the previous government. Am I right? Okay. But let me ask you, as Malaysians, what was popular about what the government of Tun Mahathir, the last government, that you found particularly praiseworthy? You're like, wow, that's mashallah, thank you for undoing that aspect of. So? Oh, is it that sensitive? I thought you were going to say like the GST and the SST and right? I thought we were going to talk about things like that. Anyway, let's move on, inshallah. I now know that democratic principles are just theoretical. The hesitation that you have now, I'm now more than ever convinced that this is just something that people write on paper. It does not truly exist in a reality or on the ground. But anyway, I thought my talk on secularism was going to get me in trouble. Right? Because I saw some policemen in the khutbah. I gave a khutbah about that. But anyway, let's move on, inshallah ta'ala, before we get arrested. The Battle of Toulouse. This battle took place in the year 102. And basically, there are two opinions amongst historians, Muslims and non-Muslims. Toulouse is in France, right? So the question is, did the Muslim advance into Europe? Did it end here? Or did it end in the next battle that I'll mention later in the time of Hisham ibn Abdul Malik? That's a question that people are asking. Because the Muslims were defeated at this battle. So does this start, like we are moving now out of Spain and we are moving into what is today France, right? So at this battle in the year 102 after the Hijrah, we lose this major battle in this city. Does this start the Muslim retreat back into the Iberian Peninsula and Spain? Or is it going to happen here? No. Did I miss it? Yeah, here we go. Or is it going to be 12 years later? The Battle of Tours. The ulama, in Arabic we call this battle, the one in 114, we call this Ma'arakatu Bilat al-Shuhada. It's like the battle of the plain of martyrs, something like that. Because so many Muslims were killed at that battle. So is it this battle? Because Tours is also in France. But anyway, we can definitely say that between the year 102 and the year 114 after the Hijrah, this is when Muslim expansion into Europe, and that at least the western part of Europe, this is when it ends. Because now the Muslim forces start withdrawing, and they use the what's the name of that mountain range that separates France from Spain? The Pyrenees, thank you, right? So now we take the Pyrenees as the separating line between Christian Europe and Muslim Spain, all right? But these two battles, the battles of Toulouse and the Battle of Tours, these are those two deciding battles that stop Muslim expansion into Europe. There's a variety of reasons why this happened. Why did the Muslims lose? We're not going to get into that now, but we do know that these are two very decisive defeats that sort of end the expansion. But you can also see that there was this willingness to move into those areas, right? The fact, because if you think of Spain, especially northern Spain, the weather is not that much different. Like southern Spain is very, what shall we call it? It's very much like North Africa and Arabia. Some of you have been to Spain already. So like southern Spain, and especially the central part of Spain, it's very similar to the climates that the Arabs are accustomed to. But the further north you go, that's when it starts to gets colder and greener, if you will. So the Muslims were that's one theory. But one of the main theories is that the Muslims were being separated from the supply, the supply lines were being stretched out. Because you're talking about if your base is in central Spain or in southern Spain and you have to supply thousands of troops hundreds of kilometers away, it becomes more and more difficult. That's one reason. But khair, let's move on inshallah ta'ala. Sorry? Don't worry, we'll get there inshallah. Which one? No, we'll get to Isham inshallah. Alright, so Yazid ibn Abdul Malik, he died in the year 105. Okay? Now, I want you to understand that Hisham ibn Abdul Malik is the next Khalifa. And he is going to be the last of the powerful and strong leaders. So we said there were 4. Alright? So this means that Yazid ibn Abdul Malik was not very popular. Okay? Or strong in that sense. And when Hisham ibn Abdul Malik comes to power, at the beginning is a lot of rebellion. And not just not just factions in the Umayyads, but in all parts of the Muslim world. There's the Berber revolt, and that's in North Africa. Then you have the Khawarij, in Iraq, and you have all of these things happening. But he's able to deal with all of this because he's already been sort of waiting for his opportunity to become the Khalifa. When someone has a long time to prepare for something, and then they finally get all that experience, and they're able to study, the situation over a long period of time, understand the politics, understand, those internal dealings. He was in an excellent position to exploit that knowledge when he came to power. Anyway, so after he deals with all of this internal dissent, he's able to establish, the rule of the Umayyads. But what's also happening during this time is that a da'wah is starting to grow in the eastern part of the Umayyad dynasty. And who can tell me what that movement is? So even though right now he's dealt with the major rebellions, he's brought stability back into the Muslim world, something is fomenting in the eastern part of the Muslim world. What's the eastern part? No. Wow, subhanallah, you are taking us hundreds of years now into the future. We are like at least 500 years before the Mongols appear on the scene. No, we're not even, this is not an external threat. That's a clue. Yeah, these are now the years in which the Abbasid call, or their movement is starting at this time. Alright? And where do they start? Wallahi, this is one of the most, whatever your thoughts on how this happens and why it happens, but you have to understand that strategically, the best place to establish a movement, a separatist movement or a rebellious movement, is as far away from the center of power as possible. And where did they start it? On the border with Iran and Afghanistan, that area, which today the Iranians call in the country of Iran, they call Khurasan. Alright, it was called Khurasan then, it's still called Khurasan now. Right, so that's that eastern province of Iran. So this is where the Abbasid da'wah starts. And they have so much to use against the Umayyads. Right? They have their lineage. They have all of the oppressive things that the Umayyads have been doing. There's the promise of equality. There's the promise of being able to have the rights that have been denied you. All of this is very appealing to those people. And so, we will talk about this tomorrow night, inshallah ta'ala, in more detail. Yes?
What was motivating the territorial expansion of the Umayyad Caliphate? Because you mentioned they didn't perform da'wah.
Yes.
So, what was the reason that they
What was the reason the Prophet ﷺ expanded? Was da'wah, right?
You mentioned this Umayyad Caliphate.
It's not, da'wah is one aspect of jihad. The other aspect of jihad is the implementation of the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is where the sharia is dominant and supreme. You understand? So, even in those areas that the Muslims conquered, and they conquered them for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the establishment of the sharia was the most important thing. That's why we said last week that Rustum said, not Rustum, but Rib'i said to Rustum, that we have come to you to take you away from the worship of the ibad to the worship of the Rabb of the ibad. So that worship is not related only to salah and zakah and the declaration of the shahada and everything that goes along with that. But it is where the law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is established in all matters. You understand? So that's one issue. And then this other issue is also that a lot of those wars were offensive and a lot of them were preemptive. So for instance, a lot of the wars that the battles the Muslims fought with the Byzantine Empire was because, in fact, just write this down. In the Umayyad time, there were two campaigns. There were two campaigns every year. There was a summer campaign and a winter campaign. The main purpose was not to conquer new land, but was to keep the border areas safe and secure. So we would lead raids into Byzantine territory, especially in what is today Anatolia, that southern part of Turkey, on the border with Syria today. So we would lead raids so that we could just keep those fortresses and those boundaries safe, and also to act as a deterrent against Byzantine aggression. So all these things we need to take into consideration, inshallah. All right. So Hisham ibn Abdul Malik, he died in the year 125 in Rabiul Awwal, and like I said, this is when lots of things started to go wrong. He was a strong leader, and all the leaders that come after him are not going to be able to deal with all of the issues that the state is facing. Now, Al-Walid ibn Yazid comes to power. Hisham ibn Abdul Malik tried very hard not for this person to become the next in line. Alright? He did not want him to become basically, one of my friend, he calls this the party Khalifa. He calls him the party boy, because he was known for his pursuit, alcohol, women, etc. Right? For his lowly pursuits, as they say. He had a very strained relationship with Hisham, because Hisham did not want him to succeed him. Even though Hisham had promised his predecessor that like Yazid ibn Abdul Malik, his brother, he promised his brother that when he is about to die, or when his reign ends, he is going to appoint Yazid's son as his successor. But when Hisham came to power and he saw how his nephew was living, he did not want his nephew to succeed him. Does that make sense? Like, if you know that your appointed successor is definitely not suited to leadership, right? he doesn't have the integrity nor the skills, then this obviously caused a lot of strain between them, but ultimately they pledged allegiance to Walid. But there was a group that did not pledge allegiance. So even though he's only the Khalifa for a year, the reason why he's only the Khalifa for a year is because in an internal civil war, and this is only amongst the Umayyads, right? This is not like the dynasty. They are fighting these battles in Syria. And so finally Walid ibn Yazid is killed, and who's the person that kills him? Is Yazid ibn Walid. I told you there's going to be a lot of Yazids and Walids, and you'll have to go back to your notes, inshallah, just to whatever notes you've taken, what pictures you've taken, you're going to have to go back to them and try to figure it out, inshallah. I'm going to apologize that we're not able to, although I could have made it easier by saying Yazid II, the son of Walid II. But why should I simplify things for you? No, I'm just kidding. I should have done that. Now it seems a mistake. But khair, we can go back, inshallah. All right. After seizing power, he places his supporters in power. So I told you that there were now those two groups. Yazid, and then there was Yazid ibn Walid ibn Abdul Malik, right? So they kill Walid, they take power, Yazid and his supporters. He places his supporters in positions of power, and he appoints his brother as his successor. But he dies in the year 126. He is not killed. He dies a natural death, as far as we know. And the next person that becomes the Khalifa, the 13th of the 14th, is going to be his brother Ibrahim. The city of Homs refuses to accept Ibrahim ibn Walid as the Khalifa. So Marwan ibn Muhammad, who's the governor of the city, he marches on Damascus, and he kills Ibrahim a few years later, though, takes him prisoner, only kills him later. And Marwan ibn Muhammad declares himself the Khalifa in the year 127. He is going to be, Marwan ibn Muhammad, is going to be the leader of the Umayyad dynasty that is going to be the last one. I told you that this branch starts with a Marwan and it ends with a Marwan. Now, who is Muhammad? He is Marwan, the son of Muhammad, the son of who? Obviously, he's an Umayyad. Right? Obviously, he's an Umayyad. Otherwise, we would have called this dynasty a different name now. But he's an Umayyad. Who's he? Don't worry, we've only mentioned his name once. By the way, his nickname was Marwan the donkey. Marwan al-Himar. Why was he called the donkey? It was not meant as an insult. It was meant as praise. Marwan ibn Muhammad, he was known as Marwan the donkey. Not as an insult, but as praise. Why? Because of his stubbornness. His steadfastness. So, Marwan ibn Muhammad ibn Marwan. Everyone with me? No one with me? Anyway, not important. Just know that he was an Umayyad. He came to power in 127, and so now we can talk about him. Alright? So there were a lot of rebellions at this time, and this is also when the and into Syria. They have now already conquered lots of the cities between Khurasan and Syria. And finally, the Umayyad forces faced the Abbasid forces at the Battle of Zab in the year 132, with the Umayyads being crushed in that battle. Alright? They then start taking over the other cities. And at this time, the Khalifa, the last Khalifa of the Umayyads, Marwan, he flees to Egypt. But he is hunted down and he is killed in Dhul Hijjah of the year 132. Make a note here, most, if not all, of the Umayyad family is slaughtered in Damascus. They are executed and the family, basically the Abbasids want to wipe out the family. One person escapes, and he flees to Spain. And there, the people pledge allegiance to him as an Umayyad Khalifa. And that will be the beginning of the Umayyad dynasty in Spain, which we'll talk about tomorrow night, inshallah. Why? Because for a long time, the Abbasids are going to try to get Spain back under Abbasid control. All right? So this happens in the year 132, corresponding to the year 750 of the Common Era. So this is the end of the Umayyad dynasty. He's the last Khalifa, and this is the beginning of the Abbasid era, which is going to last until the year 1258. Make a note of that, but I'll give you all the dates again tomorrow night. So the Abbasids will last from the year 750 to the year 1258 of the Common Era. I'll give you all the Hijri dates, etc. tomorrow. But this is 132 until 656. So this is when the Mongols conquer Baghdad. When the Mongols conquer Baghdad, that will be the end of the Abbasid period, but we'll talk about all of that. Now, quick question before we start delving into some questions and stuff. Was it confusing to do it this way? No, but I mean, did you find that me giving you the name and then some dates and then a few major issues and then moving on to the next Khalifa? Because tomorrow night we're going to have more than 30, and on Wednesday. And if we were to go through the historical, do you want me to? Because we can do it two ways. I'll give you an era. I'll give you some important personalities, some important events, and some important dates. And then I'll give you another era. And then I'll say, well, this is what happened during those 150 years. These are a few important people you need to know, a few places, names, dates. And then the last era. And we can do the same with the Ottomans. Because the next two nights, the Abbasids and the Ottomans, there's so much to cover. I just finished a book this morning. It's called Osman's Dream. It's 1,100 pages. And that's just Uthmani history, and that is just an overview. Right? She's basically telling a narrative story, the author, a narrative story of the Ottoman Empire from the beginning until its end, in 1,000 pages. So what do you think will be the best way of tackling this in the next two nights? Sorry? A chart. A chart of what? All the names? I can do that. I can definitely do that. But then we just have names. That's the problem. My concern is that I wanted to connect an era, like the reign, to just a few important things. So if I asked you, when did the Battle of Karbala happen? You'll tell me in 61, Yazid ibn Muawiyah was the Khalifa at the time. So then you can sort of place that event in a very particular time in Islamic history. If I asked you when did the Muslims first enter Al-Andalus, you'll tell me in the year 92 after the Hijrah. This is in the year 711. And this was during the time of Al-Walid ibn Abdul Malik. You understand? And that's also Umayyad history. And so on and so forth. So it's sort of connected to an era, a name, and a date. Yes? Okay.
And then you could go into the middle and some key highlights, whatever they could be that's pretty meaty. And then the summary, the end of it, you can then just summarize like what are the lessons or whatever you
All right.
put in part like for us to take away.
Okay, so that's what we're going to try to do some of that now, inshallah, in the time that we have left. Alhamdulillah, we have 20 minutes. So let's talk about the causes for the decline of the Umayyad Empire or state. The first of them is the internal conflicts between the different factions within the family, within the dynasty. So you have a lot of cousins and nephews and uncles, and obviously everyone has their own interests. Okay, whether it be economic, whether it be political, everyone has their own ambitions and aspirations. People have their own spheres of influence. Those spheres of influence don't always, line up together. And you're going to have all of those things. And so we see that already when Yazid ibn Muawiyah becomes the Khalifa. Because I'm sure that there were other people in the Umayyad family who felt that after Muawiyah, they were more entitled to be the Khalifa. Number one would be in terms of age. Number two would be in terms of experience. Number three would be in terms of their, some of them were companions of the Prophet ﷺ. Do you understand? So they had like all of these things that made them think that they were more entitled to the Khilafah. Alright? Then the second reason was this issue of appointing two successors. It's a recipe for disaster. And as we'll discuss on Wednesday, the Ottomans implemented a law that when you become Sultan, you should execute your brothers. So that was the fratricide. Sorry? We can debate the murder is haram. Okay? But what was the justification for it? I'm sure that the ulama of the time knew that it was wrong. I'm sure many ulama spoke about it. But why did they make it a policy? Because of what took place before. They were traumatized, right, by all of the civil wars, because in Turkish custom, even before Islam, basically power goes to the strongest, the one who can dominate. So if I'm the youngest brother, but I have the stronger, army, and I can defeat my older brothers in battle, then I can become the sultan, I can become the leader of the tribe. And so in Islam, and what had happened already before this law was instituted, was there was so many civil wars between the sultans of the Ottoman Empire. All right? Just one example. The Ottomans were defeated in battle against Timur Lane, another Muslim ruler, in the year 1402. Okay? This was the Battle of Ankara, and they were heavily defeated. And Bayezid, the leader, the sultan at the time, he was taken prisoner and died in prison. He had 3 sons, and these 3 sons, they fought one another, violently for almost 12 or 13 years, until one of them came out of that conflict, as the victor. And so many lives were lost, so much property was damaged, so many things happened during that time. You need to understand that if you are a person who's trying to avoid something catastrophic like that happening again, you don't necessarily see the killing of 1 or 2 or 3 or even 20 of your brothers and your nephews as a problem. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you're being pragmatic. Do you understand? 10,000 people, civilians and soldiers, and 5 people. So you're thinking like in terms of as a realist, as a pragmatist. Now, you and I, we're sitting there and we're thinking, that still doesn't justify it. We have all of these philosophical, ethical questions, like they give you in ethics. There's this common thought experiment. You have a lever, right? You are the person that's directing train traffic. So on one side, you have, track. The train is going to go. There's no stopping the train. The train is going. But on one track, there's 10 people, and on the other track is only 1 person. And you have the power to divert the train either left or right. See, it doesn't sound so easy anymore. So this is what they must have felt at the time. Obviously, it didn't last for very long. It became very, very unpopular. Because one of the sultans had about 18 to 20 of his brothers and their children killed. In fact, sometimes babies were killed as well, because they might pose a threat to to the Sultan. This was happening, yes, definitely. Now we have to speak about it. We have to try to find, a way to explain it, even though at the end we might still say it was wrong. Right? So, and the problem is that as Muslims we like to sugarcoat our history. We romanticize it. Everyone was super pious, mashallah. Everyone was an angel. I had this idea of Medina before I went there. I thought that I thought I was going to see malaika. Wallahi, that picture, I still have that picture in my mind. Wallahi, it's so fresh. It's 20 years later, and in my mind, I can still see what I thought I was feeling in Cape Town in September 2000 before I got on the plane to go to Saudi Arabia. Medina is going to be just this utopia of piety and righteousness. And we landed at the airport, we got on the bus, and we were driving from Medina airport to the university, and we stopped at a traffic light, and this car pulls up next to us, and I just hear, boof, 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 boof. And my entire dream, my fantasy is shattered at that moment. And it doesn't really get much worse, but obviously that was unrealistic. It was unrealistic of me to think that everyone was going to be, of the highest caliber in terms of piety and righteousness and, and Islamic values, etc. Anyway, so we have to avoid that too when we are talking about our history. Okay, avoid romanticizing it and having unrealistic expectations, because ultimately those 14 people whose brief histories we looked at, they were people with desires, people with personalities and character, people that had a certain upbringing, people that were influenced by, events and by other people around them. So in that sense, they were humans. And if you're looking for perfection, then I'm sorry to tell you that the Prophet ﷺ passed away. So anyone who comes after him is not going to have that divinely directed, life and seerah and biography. Khair, we move on. Tribal conflict. And this is very important. Keep this in mind because it's going to be important for our discussion about Al-Andalus. There were dominant tribes that the Umayyads used to their advantage. These were Yemeni tribes. They were basically divided into two groups. One of them was the Qais tribe. They were very powerful in Syria, and they would also be a powerful contingent in Al-Andalus, right? So they were not only so you have to think about, you have the internal issues amongst the Umayyads, but then you also have the Umayyad factions vying for influence with these powerful tribes, because those tribes are the ones that are basically providing manpower for the armies. You understand? So if you have good relations with their leaders and with people from those tribes, you can almost guarantee that you're going to have a smooth reign. But there was a lot of conflict, people trying to play one faction off from another, that tribe against this tribe, etc. So this Jahiliyyah was also one of the reasons that weakened the Umayyad state from within. Another reason was Arab domination and the resentment that domination and the way that they dealt with non-Arabs. You understand? This created a lot of resentment, and that made it fertile ground for the da'wah of the Abbasids. Because if the Abbasids, they had this, their da'wah was all about, what's that fancy word? Egalitarian, right? They had this egalitarian da'wah. Like, if you join us, if you become Muslims, then you'll be given your due rights. We'll end the domination and the discrimination that the Umayyads have practiced on you for, all these decades, etc., etc. So Arab domination, and it was definitely part of the Umayyad, outlook. Now, another issue that was also the cause of their downfall was all these sectarian groups. There were two main groups that I want to talk about. Number one is the Khawarij, and number two is the Shia. Right? So these sectarian differences were not only religious, but also political. Because all of these groups were using those religious differences as a platform for their political aspirations. Does that make sense? Because think about this. The two are not separated. And I don't want you to think of them as being separated. Because if I view you as being an illegitimate ruler on an Islamic basis, it means that I wish to replace you and appoint someone who has the right stuff, if you will. Someone who does not have all of the issues that you have from a religious and Islamic perspective. So if I'm a Khariji, the Umayyads obviously are not suitable because they believe that a person should be selected and that person should be the best candidate. And if you are Shi'i, your view is that it has to be someone from the family of the Prophet, from Ahlul Bayt. And if, as the Shia movement grows and develops its foundations, it's going to be one of the Imams who traces his lineage back to Hussein. Like the 12 Imams, like in Iran and Lebanon and other places, they believe in 12 Imams. And all of those Imams, so you have Ali, then you have Hassan, then you have Hussein, and then the other 9 are all descendants of Hussein. You understand? And they believe that those 12 men are divinely appointed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to lead the Muslims. But here's the problem. The 12th Imam, apparently, according to the ulama, he did not exist. The 12th Imam is a figment of their imagination. Because the 11th Imam, who is all the other 11 are real people with real biographies and real histories. But the 11th Imam did not leave behind a son, according to Sunni scholars. Right? So, but the Shia say he had a son, and that son, he went into hiding, and he's been in hiding since, what year? I don't know. I'll do some checking so that we can have this information for tomorrow, because it will be important. But he's been in hiding for about 800 years now. He is the Mahdi, the awaited Mahdi. So he's coming back, and he is going to fill the world with justice as it has been filled with oppression. So this is the Mahdi that they are waiting for. This is the same reason that why in Iran and other places, they do not believe that Khomeini? Khomeini came to power in Iran based on the theory of Wilayatul Faqih. Because the Shia, central to their belief, is that only the Imam can be the political leader. Right? Now what happens when you don't have an Imam? So the Imam needs a proxy. So Khomeini, he came to power as a representative and as a proxy for the Imam. You understand? So his political power and the political power of the supreme leader of Iran now, and you have to also remember that there are many Shia ulama and scholars who don't believe in this concept of Wilayatul Faqih. The, what can we call it? The rule of the scholar, the jurist, which is what Khomeini and Khamenei is. Khamenei. How do you pronounce his name? Khamenei? Yeah. Anyway. But you understand what I'm talking about, right? So these people are in political power as proxies and stand-ins for the awaited Mahdi. Right? So I hope that's clear. Anyway, so there were these sectarian differences. The last issue was the success of the Abbasid movement. Now that's two ways. Number one was da'wah, was their ability to infiltrate is perhaps the wrong word, but their ability to spread their ideology amongst the Muslims, firstly of Iran, and then Iraq, and then to gather that support, which then translated into military support. Does it make sense? So they first developed, they had all these people going throughout the Muslim world and spreading their ideas, why Muslims need to pledge allegiance to their leaders, and why Muslims need to, to sort of coalesce and gather around them. And then obviously, once you got that, what can we call that? Ideological commitment, you can then get military commitment. Right? And people joining the army and physically fighting for those ideals. Like the communists, like the Bolsheviks. They were first spreading those ideas for a long time. So between Karl Marx and the Russian Revolution, that's a long time. So there's a lot of da'wah and writing and speeches and so on. And that finally became a reality in the revolution of 1917. Right? So now you're actually translating ideas into action. And now you actually come to power, etc., etc. So there are lots of similarities throughout history that we can look to. But the success of the Abbasid movement is also one of the reasons for the end of the Umayyad dynasty. Right? I keep on saying next week because my habit is I teach a class and then the next one in the series is next week. But tomorrow night, inshallah ta'ala, we'll continue with our discussion. Are there any questions on anything related or unrelated? Yes. Now, go for it. No. Okay, I'll try. I'll add some things also, inshallah. Right? But yeah, no problem. I can. Yes.
Sorry, I missed a great lot of that. What happens after Hussein stopped by the Umayyad army?
Okay, so what happens is that he refuses their ultimatum, and so battle is then inevitable. The battle takes place. Now, in the Shia sources, there's all sorts of incredible things that were happening there, right? In terms of miracles and in terms of violence and and just lots of things added to the narrative. Okay? There's one thing that we need to understand is that Yazid ibn Muawiyah, from the Sunni perspective, it was not his intention to kill Hussein. Okay? It was not his intention. Because no matter what we think of him, he would have known what the consequences of that was going to be. It's the Prophet's grandson. If it was just another person that was threatening, to rebel against him, that's a different story. But this is the Prophet ﷺ's grandson. So his instructions was to stop Hussein from entering Kufa. The governor and the commander of the army understood that as through any means possible or necessary. And if that meant that we needed to kill him, then that's what they understood from that order. And so they went to war. The battle didn't last very long because they were heavily outnumbered. The entourage of Hussein was probably less than 150 people, right? So it was not an army, because most of the people that accompanied him were women and children. There were very few people of fighting ability in that group. So many were killed, and Muawiyah, not Muawiyah, keep on. It's that time of the day. Yazid did not order that he be killed, but when he was killed, he was beheaded. His head was sent to Damascus to Yazid with the rest of the family of Hussein. Yazid, when he received the family of Hussein in Damascus, he treated them well, and he took care of them, and he ate with them apparently, and then finally he sent them back, right, to Makkah. And it is said that because the head of Hussein apparently has 4 burial sites in the Muslim world, or 3. One is in Egypt, one is in Karbala, and the other one is somewhere in Iran. Right? So all these places where the head of Hussein might be. But Allah knows best. I need to double check, but I think one of the scholars says that he believes that the head of Hussein was returned with the family of Hussein to Makkah. And that is where the head was buried. But Allah knows best. Allah knows best. The fact that, when someone rebels, it was common practice, and even the Ottomans and others used to do this a lot. If a leader of a rebellion was caught and executed, his body or his head will be displayed. Right? And Yazid did not do this with Hussein. So there's a lot of things that we left out of the story, but like I said, we wanted an overview, and we wanted to. I hope my dua is that you know history you did not know 2 hours ago. All right? And if I've accomplished that at least, then I think we've spent our time wisely, alhamdulillah. Are there any other questions?
The 11th Sultan, Khalifah Walid bin Yazid, was killed by
Yes. No. Walid ibn Yazid ibn Abdul Malik. Yes? And Yazid ibn Walid. Wait, I will show you. Right, this is the book that I use. So I'll give you the list. Here we go. You can all read Arabic, right? Why is it done? All right, so here you have, let's go through the names very quickly. You have Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan, right, 41 to 60. Then you have Yazid ibn Muawiyah, and he's called Yazid the First. All right, and he is from 60. Then you have Muawiyah ibn Yazid, and he's called Muawiyah the Second. And alhamdulillah, there's only two of them. So that makes things easy. So he was only in the year 64, didn't rule for very long. Then you have Marwan ibn Hakam, also ruled for just a year, 64 to 65. Then you have Abdul Malik, and I'm going to spend some time here, if I can get this to work. Here we go. All right, so now we have Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, yes? 2, 3, 4 sons that rule after him. Is that clear? All right, so who are they? They are Walid ibn Abdul Malik, and he's known as Walid the First. Then you have Sulaiman ibn Abdul Malik. Then you have Yazid ibn Abdul Malik, and he's called Yazid the Second. Yes? Now there are 3 Yazids, but don't worry. After him is Hisham ibn Abdul Malik. And so now we have Walid ibn Yazid. Who is he? Walid, the son of Yazid, the son of Abdul Malik. Everyone still with me? Yes. Yes. Then we have Yazid ibn Walid. And who is he the son of? This Walid over here. Okay. Tomorrow night, I'm going to give you my friend Bilal Ismail's breakdown of this, and it's a bit more clearer because he's put it on a chart that sort of links all the different family. It's like a diagram. All right. So inshallah tomorrow night you can just take a picture of that. I'll put it on the slides so that we avoid all of these issues. But basically, this Yazid is the son of this Walid. Everyone with me? He's not the son of this Walid. And then you have Marwan ibn Muhammad. Khair inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. I'll see you all tomorrow night. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.